Across the vast continent of Africa, the specter of colonialism still lingers, casting a long shadow over its people and its future. The echoes of a time when foreign powers dominated the land, exploiting its wealth and subjugating its inhabitants, can still be felt in every corner of the continent. The legacy of colonialism is not just a chapter in history books, it is a living, breathing reality that continues to shape the lives of millions of Africans today. For centuries, European powers carved up Africa like a prize, drawing arbitrary borders with little regard for the ethnic, cultural, and linguistic diversity of its people. These borders, often drawn in distant European capitals, have had lasting consequences, sowing seeds of conflict and division that persist to this day. The Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885, where European nations formalized their claims to African territory, epitomizes this era of ruthless ambition and disregard for indigenous sovereignty. Exploiting its resources and subjugating its people, the colonial powers extracted vast amounts of wealth from Africa, often through brutal and inhumane means. The continent's rich deposits of minerals, fertile lands, and abundant wildlife were seen as treasures to be plundered. African laborers were forced to work under harsh conditions with little to no regard for their well-being. This exploitation was not just economic but also deeply personal, as it stripped communities of their autonomy and dignity. This period of exploitation, brutality, and cultural erasure has left an indelible mark on the continent, creating a legacy of trauma and loss that is still felt today. The cultural heritage of many African societies was systematically dismantled, with traditional practices, languages, and artifacts often suppressed or destroyed. The psychological scars of colonialism run deep, affecting generations and influencing contemporary African identity and self-perception. Shaping its destiny in profound ways, the impact of colonialism is evident in the educational systems, legal frameworks, and urban landscapes of modern African nations. Many African cities still bear the architectural imprints of their colonial past, with grand buildings and infrastructure projects that were designed to serve the interests of the colonizers. Educational curricula often reflect colonial histories and perspectives, sometimes at the expense of indigenous knowledge and traditions. From the bustling cities to the rural heartlands, the legacy of colonialism is woven into the very fabric of African societies. In urban centers, the influence of colonial planning and architecture is unmistakable, while in rural areas the impact of land dispossession and economic disruption continues to be felt. The social and economic structures established during the colonial period have had lasting effects, often perpetuating inequality and hindering development. The arbitrary borders, the economic disparities, and the political instability that plague many African nations today are all grim reminders of this troubled past. These borders, drawn with little consideration for the complex realities on the ground, have often led to conflicts and tensions. Economic policies imposed during the colonial era have left many African economies dependent on a narrow range of exports, vulnerable to global market fluctuations. Political systems, too, were often designed to maintain control rather than promote genuine self-governance, leading to ongoing struggles for democracy and stability. Yet, amidst the pain and the struggle, the spirit of Africa endures. The resilience and creativity of its people shine through in countless ways, from vibrant cultural expressions to innovative solutions to contemporary challenges. Communities across the continent are working to reclaim their heritage, celebrate their identities, and build a future that honors their past while looking forward with hope and determination. The continent's rich history, its vibrant cultures, and its indomitable people continue to inspire hope and resilience. Festivals, ceremonies, and everyday practices keep traditions alive, while historical sites and monuments serve as reminders of both the struggles and triumphs of the past. The diversity and dynamism of African cultures are sources of strength and pride, offering a powerful counter-narrative to the legacy of colonialism. This essay delves into the profound and lasting impact of colonialism on Africa, examining how the past continues to influence the present. By exploring the socio-economic, political, and cultural consequences of colonial rule, we can better understand the challenges and opportunities facing the continent today. The stories of resistance, adaptation, and resilience that emerge from this history are crucial to shaping a more just and equitable future. Exploring its socio-economic, political, and cultural consequences, we see how colonialism has left a complex legacy that is both a burden and a source of strength. The economic structures, political systems, and social hierarchies established during the colonial period continue to influence contemporary African societies in myriad ways. At the same time, the struggles for independence and self-determination have fostered a spirit of resilience and innovation that drives progress and change. While also highlighting the ongoing struggle for healing, justice, and progress, this narrative underscores the importance of acknowledging and addressing the past. Efforts to promote reconciliation, economic development, and political stability are crucial to building a future where all Africans can thrive. The journey towards healing and justice is ongoing, but the determination and solidarity of African communities offer a powerful testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. The year 1884 marked a turning point in Africa's history. This was a time when the continent, rich in natural resources and diverse cultures, was largely unexplored by European powers. Africa was home to a myriad of ethnic groups, each with its own unique traditions, languages, and social structures. However, the allure of Africa's untapped wealth did not go unnoticed by the European nations, who were eager to expand their empires and increase their influence on the global stage. It was the year of the Berlin Conference, a gathering that would forever alter the fate of the African continent. The conference was convened by German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck and attended by representatives from 14 European countries. These nations, driven by a desire for power and wealth, sought to establish rules for the colonization and trade in Africa, without any regard for the indigenous populations who had lived there for centuries, where European powers convened to divide the African continent amongst themselves. The conference was marked by intense negotiations and strategic alliances, as each nation vied for the most lucrative territories. The discussions were not about the welfare of the African people, but rather about how to exploit the continent's resources for maximum gain. The European leaders, seated around a large table, used maps and charts to carve up Africa, drawing borders with little understanding or respect for the existing cultural and ethnic landscapes. This infamous conference, driven by greed and imperial ambition, resulted in the signing of several treaties that formalized the division of Africa. These documents, filled with legal jargon and diplomatic language, masked the true nature of the agreements: the systematic exploitation and subjugation of an entire continent. The European powers justified their actions with a sense of racial superiority and a belief in their civilizing mission, claiming they were bringing progress and enlightenment to the so-called Dark Continent. Formalized the scramble for Africa, a period of ruthless competition and conquest. This era saw European nations racing to claim territories, often resorting to violence and coercion to achieve their goals. Colonial armies were dispatched to enforce the new borders, and expeditions were launched to explore and exploit the land. The impact on the African people was devastating, as communities were torn apart and traditional ways of life were disrupted. With callous disregard for Africa's diverse cultures, languages, and existing social structures, the European powers imposed their own systems of governance and economic exploitation. They introduced new laws, taxes, and labor practices that were alien to the African way of life. The traditional leaders and social hierarchies were often undermined or co-opted, leading to a loss of autonomy and self-determination for many African communities. The European powers drew lines on a map, creating artificial borders that have had devastating consequences to this day. These borders, drawn with little regard for the existing ethnic and cultural divisions, forced disparate groups into the same political entities while splitting others across multiple colonies. This arbitrary partitioning laid the groundwork for future conflicts and tensions, as groups that had previously coexisted peacefully were now pitted against each other in a struggle for power and resources. These arbitrary divisions split ethnic groups, ignited conflicts over resources, and created a legacy of division and strife. The colonial powers exploited these divisions to maintain control, often playing different groups against each other to prevent unified resistance. This strategy of divide and rule had long-lasting effects, as the seeds of mistrust and animosity were sown deep within the fabric of African societies and sowed seeds of instability that continue to plague many African nations. The legacy of the Berlin Conference is evident in the numerous conflicts and civil wars that have erupted across the continent in the post-colonial era. The struggle for control over valuable resources such as minerals, oil, and arable land has fueled violence and corruption, hindering development and progress. The Berlin Conference stands as a stark reminder of the arrogance and brutality of colonialism. It is a symbol of the destructive impact of imperialism and the lengths to which powerful nations will go to achieve their ambitions. The conference's legacy is a testament to the dangers of unchecked greed and the human cost of prioritizing profit over people. It is a testament to the dangers of unchecked greed and the enduring legacy of a system that prioritized profit over people. Despite the immense challenges, the African people have shown remarkable resilience and strength in the face of adversity. Throughout the colonial period and beyond, there have been numerous movements and uprisings aimed at reclaiming autonomy and dignity. The spirit of resistance and the quest for justice continue to inspire new generations. The arbitrary borders drawn in Berlin continue to fuel conflicts, hinder economic development, and create barriers to regional cooperation. The legacy of colonialism is still felt in the political and economic challenges faced by many African nations today. Efforts to address these issues require a deep understanding of the historical context and a commitment to fostering unity and collaboration among African states, and undermine political stability across the continent. The path to a more stable and prosperous Africa lies in addressing the root causes of these challenges and working towards a future where the continent's rich diversity is celebrated and its people can thrive in peace and harmony. Colonialism's economic impact on Africa was nothing short of devastating. European powers, driven by a relentless pursuit of profit, transformed African economies into extractive systems designed to serve their own interests. Natural resources from gold and diamonds to rubber and timber were plundered on a massive scale, enriching colonial powers while leaving African economies depleted and dependent. This systematic exploitation created a legacy of economic inequality that continues to haunt Africa today. Many African countries remain trapped in a cycle of poverty, heavily reliant on the export of raw materials, and lacking the industrial base and infrastructure needed for sustainable growth. The wealth gap between former colonial powers and their former colonies remains a stark reminder of the enduring impact of this exploitative system. Section 4. Political instability, the seeds of discord. Beyond the economic exploitation, colonialism also sowed the seeds of political instability across Africa. The arbitrary borders imposed by European powers created artificial states that often grouped together diverse ethnicities and rival groups with little in common. This disregard for existing social fabrics and power structures created tensions and conflicts that continue to simmer today. Moreover, colonial powers often implemented divide-and-rule tactics, pitting different groups against each other to maintain control. This strategy of fostering internal divisions further exacerbated tensions and weakened the fabric of African societies, leaving a legacy of mistrust and instability that has made it difficult for many African nations to achieve lasting peace and unity. Section 5. Cultural erosion, the loss of identity. Colonialism's assault on Africa was not just economic and political, it was also deeply cultural. The imposition of foreign values and systems by European powers was a deliberate attempt to dismantle and replace the rich tapestry of African traditions, languages, and beliefs that had flourished for centuries. This cultural invasion was not a mere side effect of colonial rule, it was a calculated strategy to control and dominate the African continent. European powers, in their quest to impose their own values and systems, sought to dismantle and replace existing African traditions, languages, and beliefs. They viewed African cultures as inferior and sought to civilize the continent by eradicating indigenous practices and replacing them with European norms. This process was often violent and coercive, involving the destruction of cultural artifacts, the banning of traditional ceremonies, and the imposition of foreign languages and religions. This cultural imperialism had a devastating impact on African societies, leading to the erosion of indigenous knowledge systems, languages, and cultural practices. The loss of these cultural elements meant that many Africans were cut off from their heritage and history, leading to a profound sense of dislocation and loss of identity. Traditional ways of life were disrupted and the social fabric of many communities was torn apart. Missionaries, often working hand in hand with colonial administrations, played a key role in this cultural transformation. They established schools that prioritized European languages and cultures, often denigrating African traditions as primitive or backward. These schools became instruments of cultural assimilation, teaching African children to reject their own heritage in favor of European ways of thinking and living. They established schools that prioritized European languages and cultures, often denigrating African traditions as primitive or backward. The curriculum was designed to create a generation of Africans who were alienated from their own cultures and more aligned with European values. This educational system not only suppressed African traditions but also instilled a sense of inferiority in African students, making them believe that their own cultures were worthless. This systematic suppression of African cultures contributed to a loss of identity, self-worth, and cultural pride for generations of Africans. The impact of this cultural disruption is still felt today. The loss of language, for example, has not only hindered communication, but also eroded traditional knowledge systems passed down through generations. Many African languages, rich in history and wisdom, have been lost or are on the brink of extinction. The impact of this cultural disruption is still felt today. The loss of language, for example, has not only hindered communication but also eroded traditional knowledge systems passed down through generations. The undermining of traditional leadership structures created a void that was often filled by corrupt officials more interested in self-enrichment than in serving their people. This has led to a crisis of leadership in many African countries, where the values of community and service have been replaced by greed and self-interest. The loss of language, for example, has not only hindered communication, but also eroded traditional knowledge systems passed down through generations. The erosion of these knowledge systems has had a profound impact on African societies, affecting everything from agriculture to medicine to governance. Traditional practices that were once the bedrock of African communities have been forgotten or marginalized, leading to a loss of cultural continuity and resilience. The undermining of traditional leadership structures created a void that was often filled by corrupt officials, more interested in self-enrichment than in serving their people. This has led to a crisis of leadership in many African countries, where the values of community and service have been replaced by greed and self-interest. The legacy of colonialism's cultural assault is a continent still grappling with the loss of its identity, striving to reclaim and rebuild